It is that time again. Hello and welcome. You are watching From Saba to Barbados, the maritime legacy of Captain Eric Hassell. This is episode number 4. As always, thanks for your time. In last week's program, we discussed the work that occurred here in and around the careenage. We also talked about the goods and other products that were brought into Barbados. As you have already heard, young Eric Hassell became a captain in his early 20s, and quite a lot happened during that period. Evidently, young Eric Hassell was a brave man. Take it over, Dr. Carter.
He moved from the schooner aspect, he moved from skippering schooners to motorboats. So in 1963, he's skippering this motorboat called the MV Zipper. And on its way from Guyana, loaded with rice, the boat suffered a leak.
He said it happened very, very suddenly. And he believed it was sabotage. And yes, he said it happened very suddenly. I think he said the engineer said water was coming into the cabin.
He suspected that the boat sank, that it hit an underwater log, because he said he remembered the engineer coming to him and said, Captain, a lot of water is coming out in the engine room. So he said he believed that, because he said he felt a thud, right? He felt a thud. And then when he went and looked in the engine room, the water was practically up to the engine. Mm-hmm.
They tried in vain to pump out this water, but to no avail. That boat was crippled, and Captain Hassell knew it. He had a crew of 12. He had his lifeboats, and there were a few persons traveling with the crew as well. There was a Mrs. Shipley, there was a Mr. De Freitas. They were also traveling from Guyana on Captain Hassell's boat in 1963. The problem, however, was that Captain Hassell could not swim.
And there lies a problem. Brian Griffith, who incidentally is the son of the late Dighton Griffith, whose name now dignifies the school in Christchurch, looks back on this with a degree of amazement.
What I used to laugh at was that Peach couldn't swim. And he was a sea captain. And all I know is that when the zipper sank, he clung on to something, lived, and swore never to go to sea again, which he did not do, which I thought was really funny. But I suppose that's happening. A sea captain that couldn't swim.
I've always found that a kind of oddity, but I suppose you can be a captain, and it would be though you're on land. Because you're a captain don't mean you have to be out there in the sea. But it was an oddity which I have always found interesting and almost amusing. And the fact that he was the last man to get off the sinking ship on which he was, I wonder to what extent he was showing the responsibility of being captain, making sure that he was the last to get off, or he was sure that he made sure that he only got off when a rescuing ship was nearby, so that as soon as he got in the water, he would be taken out. I've never explored that with him, but he maintained to the end that he could not swim.
Well, perhaps it was the former. He ensured that everyone was safely off the ship before he was. Now, granddaughter Tassa Chatterton Shaw, interestingly enough, she enjoyed excursions around the island at seasides with her grandfather. But during that time, she was not aware that he could not swim.
As a young girl, that never struck me in any way because, well, we were always at the beach, by the beach, you know. He would go to the beach, not regularly, but I didn't realize that disconnect at that time because we were always close to the sea. On summer vacations, he would relocate to Cattle Wash, again by the sea. He always talked about absorbing the fresh ozone air. He always used this word ozone. Now it is a buzzword. He always talked about ozone. And he loved absorbing and inhaling the freshness of the breezes coming off the East Coast. We were always by the sea, but I never made that connection that he couldn't swim. But I know he was a man of the sea. And that is how he developed himself. That he, you know, as a captain, mentored by his father, he was a man of the sea. But he encouraged us to learn to swim and to get into the sea and to enjoy the freshness and the effervescence of it. And so we were always surrounded by the sea. I learned to swim at the Harbor Master police station there in Bay Street by none other than Lorenzo Best. And he would have supported that. All of us had to learn to swim. I remember seeing the black cobblers, and at that time there was a jetty, and you either had to sink or swim, right? So there was no other choice, and I think to this day, all of us as Hassells and members of the Hassell family, we love the sea. We love the beauty of the sea. There's one grandchild who is a marine biologist, in fact, two who have studied marine biology, and one is in Canada, one is here in Barbados now, and several of the grandchildren also worked in the business at various points in time, whether that was summer vacations or full-time employment. We all had a taste of shipping and of the sea.
Well, what do you expect from the grandchildren of a man who made his living at sea? Now, let us step back and return to the discussion with Dr. Henderson Carter, who was chronicling the events surrounding the tragedy of the Zipper.
And he gave the order to abandon ship. The crew prepared the lifeboats and got in their lifeboats, and their passengers also got in their lifeboats.
He said he rushed out of the cabin. No, he told the crew, get as much food as you can and put the lifeboats in the water. They did that. They put plantains. I think they had one female passenger. They got her in, they got the boat out, they got the food in, and they left him.
And Captain Hassell was the last to leave the Zipper as it was going down. Before it went down, however, he sent a distress call, and that call was picked up right here in Barbados.
He had the presence of mind to call Cable and Wireless. He called Cable and Wireless and said, Mayday, Mayday, Zipper sinking. And somebody at Cable and Wireless, who was his friend, said to the others, that sounds like peace. And they got into action to get somebody to find where he was. Yeah, in the meantime, he was barely able to make that call.
So a distress call had gone out, but how would Captain Hassell get off the boat? There are two stories on this issue. One story is that Captain Hassell, knowing that he could not swim, jumped into the water, and his crew members pulled him aboard the lifeboat. Another story says that Captain Hassell was there on the ship. The ship is going down and it is listing. And because it is moving from side to side, it threw him off into the water and he was pulled on board the lifeboat.
And he said, you know, he couldn't swim. He was supposed to be the last off. But, however, they told him to jump. He jumped and he barely made it. And the ship, of course, would have gone down right away. Yeah. So, that's about it. It was a very, very sad time.
But that was the beginning of the horrors for the sea captain, the Barbadian sea captain. Because as they were picked up by another vessel, they were taken back to British Guyana. And they were interviewed, or I should say interrogated, because in those days, Guyana had strict policies about the movement of money and the movement of certain important articles from the country. And they questioned him, they quizzed him. As a matter of fact, Captain Hassell was very annoyed with his treatment in British Guyana after he had escaped death, really. He was very annoyed, but anyway, he was put aboard a plane and he landed in Barbados safely after that ordeal.
When the boat sank with him, I was working at Getty's Grant then for $80 a month. I remember Mr. Toppin and Mr. Thing. When they took me on there, Mr. Hassell, we do not pay big salaries, but we pay a big bonus. We give 4 months bonus. So 4 by 80, $320 bonus, right? So when Daddy's boat sank and he came to Barbados, he came at the airport, I went to meet him. I had $80 in my pocket, and I gave him the $80. He went all over Bridgetown telling everybody. He said, my boat sank, but when I landed in Barbados, I still had money in my pocket.
Now, that ordeal is important to help us to understand why Captain Hassell set up his shipping enterprise.
You know, Daddy couldn't swim from here to that chair to save his life. Could not do it. I never wanted to either. He never went to church either, but he believed, you know, and he believed. And he says, the day a vessel, motor vessel, sinks with me, I am coming off the sea. He always said, the only way I am doing this is for my 8 children. And so it happened, vessel sank with him, came off the sea and started his own business.
And he kept his promise. So after the MV Zipper went down in 1963, March 3rd, Captain Hassell came ashore and he never went back to sea. He never skippered of another vessel. But that was the foundation for the creation of a shipping enterprise. And that foundation was based on his over 30, 40 years of experience in the schooner trade, in the motorboat trade, over 40 years of contacts with people in Guyana, and he had many friends in Guyana, in Trinidad, contacts with people in the Eastern Caribbean, contacts with his colleagues in Saba.
Some of the other schooner captains, they told him in those days they had called the British West Indies Schooner Owners Association. Well, it was exactly what it says from that. And it was not well run, because this guy who was in charge of the British West Indies Schooner Owners Association in Barbados, he was very poor, you know, very, very poor, very poor. He had no experience or whatnot. So when Daddy started the business then, it was like relief for the the ship owners, he said, well, at last we have somebody who can represent us. The schooner captain said, well, Captain Hassell, you know everything to know about the sea. Come, you know, you don't open an agency, you know, and who we can go to and ask something about the sea, about what to do when you're going here, when you're going there, you know, and that was a relief for them, for them. So we really had no, they will have little petty squabbles. I think somebody started an agency here, but they were never able to compete with us because Daddy had a reputation, you know, and he did it. He did it out in the sea, and now he's in land, you know. So, you know, you cannot ask him for more, an individual for more than that. You know, he tell you exactly what to go through.
He was ready to go into a new type of business, representing schooners and representing motorboats in a form of an agency, representing those vessels based here in Barbados. So, Captain Hassell first set up his small shipping agency in a building to my right called the Barnes Building near the Charles Duncan O'Neill Bridge. The Barnes Building. That is where his first office was located around 1969. And the company started around 1969. That is where his office was located.
It was Daddy, myself, and a messenger. Barnes Building was a commercial building, like for everywhere else. And we just had a little, you can't even call it an office, a room in Barnes Building. But we were only there for about 5 months or whatnot. Then we moved from there to upstairs. It used to be Citibank at the time, the top of Broad Street. And then I think it turned to Caribbean Commercial Bank. And then from there we went to Cockspur House and then to Carlisle House, 2 places in Carlisle House. And we had about 6 staff there, right? That is where we registered the company then. I can't remember the year, but it was from that building then. Because we had like windows would overlook onto the careenage, and we would look out and see what's going on, what trucks are not doing. Care hunt can't get the bag, the luggage, or the cargo, and we would call them and we'd look and see. And as soon as the last care hunt truck moves out, we then call Brighton. Care hunt cargo is gone. So you can send your trucks now. So we were right on the scene.
And in that period, one of the things that he shipped from Barbados was limestone. A lot of limestone came from the Rogers and the Ellesmere Quarry. The Ellesmere Quarry is located in St. George, Rogers Quarry in St. Michael. And a lot of that limestone was used in the Guyana sugarcane fields to reduce the acidity of the soil.
Pulverized limestone from the quarries, right? They used to dig the pulverized limestone, put it in crocus bags, and ship it to Guyana to upkeep some of the roads and whatnot down there. Yes, because you know Georgetown is under sea level. You go to build a house in Georgetown, you see them come with the picks or whatever it is, and then the buckets of water, underwater.
And for many years, in the 1960s and through to the 1970s, and even the 80s, limestone was shipped to Guyana. And Captain Hassell organized those shipments of limestone to British Guyana.
Some weeks we used to be agents for every single vessel in the careenage. We used to represent all of them. And we knew everything, talking about computers and whatnot, we knew everything in our heads. Because you know, West Indian personalities and whatnot. You had to give Like if you had Sir Lee Smith going to St. Vincent or whatnot, and you had the TB radar going to St. Lucia. Well, they're all West Indies, so they're looking to see what that one is carrying, and this one is looking to see what that one is carrying. So you had all these different personalities, individuals, clash of personalities, because the jealousies and whatnot. You know, but we knew all those accounts in our heads. It could come anytime. You know, like the same Cyril Smith, Captain Selby will call and says, "Want $5,000? Tell Captain Hassell to get $5,000 for me." And we knew right in our head the money was there. And it is just that everybody knew everybody else, and you had to try to satisfy everyone. Cement started coming from Trinidad at the Lower Wharf. Well, that was a whole different operation, because then that involved stevedores, registered stevedores from the port. So that was a whole different operation altogether. So then as years passed, then we went down to Cockspur House. Then by then, the boats in the Carinas were getting less and less and less and less. By which time, I think by the time we finished occupying that building, I think they were practically all down in the Deepwater Harbour then. And we realized that it was only a matter of time before the vessels went down to the Deepwater Harbour. And eventually that came, all the inter-island vessels disappeared, right? And that was the end of the careenage in the waterfront.
And Eric Hassell's business was among that number that was part of the transition from the careenage to the Deepwater Harbour.
It was different to us, for us, but of course we had to get into it to survive, you know? We had to get into it to survive. So we just did what was necessary, applied for stevedore license, just like everybody else. But of course we were always known then as with the small vessels, but of course with time the small vessels disappeared. And then we were just like the Da Costas and the Plantations and the whatever. We got larger vessels, and as our name, you know, got around more and more and more, because once people overseas, they hear Hassell, they know it's a Caribbean, you know.
It is important to know that Captain Peace was indeed a family man. Not only did he base his business on his wide experience as a captain, but the success of his business was based on the family, that solidity of his family life.
He married to Doris, and together they had 8 children.
But she always had a living helper, usually somebody from the country. And my mom had 2 sisters, and they helped tremendously with us. Yeah. So yes, there were 8 children in 10 years. You might have heard that. And lots of fights and squabbles later.
And that is important, because then Captain Hassell was in Barbados after the loss of the Zipper. Doris used part of the family's home at Blue Waters in Christchurch to house visitors. Of course, visitors would pay a fee.
My grandmother was also a very strong backbone for him. In that after the Zipper sank, and having 8 children to feed, she quickly came up with the idea of transforming their house. By then, the children, they were either studying or had been married. But she started a guest house in the early stages of the business on Barnes Building, and she had, I think, 4 bedrooms that were transformed into, guest houses were very popular. And that served to be a source of income for the family and foreign exchange as well. And my grandmother was very attentive to serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And she was in a key location because at that time, which would have been in the 70s now, they were living right opposite Accra Beach. And you couldn't want a finer beach. So she provided a sort of bed and breakfast, very personalized service, but it was also a means of support to the family. And again, that was done in a very quiet way. There was no sign up, no big headlines, but people, they knew the taxi operators right opposite or next door to Accra Beach Hotel. So there was a vibrant business going.
And Doris played a very important role as his wife to make sure that the family was not imperiled. So we say, therefore, that when we look at the success of the Hassell enterprise, it has to be attributed in a great deal to the family.
This is an enduring story, and that story and the many lessons underscore the importance of a strong and committed family life to the success of your business. Oh, that we would take the time to study and understand the fine examples of our people who went before us and who laid those solid foundations on which today's businesses are built. Eric Hassell exemplifies all of the above. This has been From Sabre to Barbados, the maritime legacy of Captain Eric Hassell. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Thanks for your time.